Here is Robert Conyers-Darcy, 4th Earl of Holderness, close friend of the King, George III. Through the coming slideshow, I shall talk about his relationship with the King and their shared passions. Here is the general location of the estate post-refurbishment, with the A1 to the east and Wensleydale to the west. The idea for this paper came from the discovery during the last season, 2021, of a commemorative silver crown minted by the Royal Mint, referring to the completion of works in 1769 by John Carr of York to refurbish the house as a modern country house, and also largely the completion of the landscape works undertaken by Lancelot Capability Brown. The crown is a clear mark of the King's close relationship, was issued to all estate staff as a mark of appreciation. King George III was a passionate supporter of the new scientific improvements in agriculture, famously associated with Robert Coke at Holcombe Hall in Norfolk and in other locations, and the popular mood depicted him as Farmer George following his improvements in Windsor Great Park, including the development of model farms. The 4th Earl similarly espoused the new improvements, setting up 3 new farms at Hornby in the manner of eye-catchers on the cardinal points of the compass, rather as the Tatton Sykes family did at Sledmere. We have Crabtree Hall or Street House to the east, Arbour Hill to the south, and also Home Farm directly to the west. They are all of a slightly different design, but a very similar layout, designed as architectural compositions to complement the works undertaken at the main house. And each had a particular specialism. Home Farm was the arable farm supporting the estate, with the house sitting prominently on the principal elevation and the farm buildings aligned to the rear. Home Farm is based on a similar structure previously created by Carr up the estate of Stanwick St John, up to the northwest. Here we have the Eastern Farm, Crabtree Hall or Street House, to a design by John Carr. Crabtree Hall and Arbour Hill are very similar in their overall appearance, with the castellated towers and central octagon, although Crabtree Hall is constructed in brick and Arbour Hill in stone. Crabtree Hall was a sheep and beef farm associated with the estate. That was its particular specialism. It was later associated with the divorce of the daughter of the 4th Earl of Holderness, Amelia Conyers-Darcy, from the 5th Duke of Leeds, having been found out that she was having an affair with Captain Byron, the father of the poet Lord Byron. Here we have the Great Barn associated with Crabtree Hall or Street House, lying directly behind the farmhouse and within a tightly confined courtyard. Here we have the principal model farm, Arbour Hill, visible as an eye-catcher from the new show front at Hornby, and the approach that would have been taken by visitors to Hornby would have looked directly at this elevation of Arbour Hill. Again, looked at as a mini country house with two towers on either wing and a central octagon. The current owner describes it as marvellously impractical to use inside, because it is basically an architectural conceit to be viewed as part of a wider landscape. And here we have one of the dovecotes at Arbour Hill, which act as an extension of the overall elevation. And the view of Hornby Castle across the valley from Arbour Hill, as you see, a very close visual relationship with Arbour Hill being seen as part of the wider parkland landscape designed by the Reverend William Mason and Capability Brown to be viewed and view the castle itself, and to appreciate the importance of the Earl and his relatives within wider political society. As part and parcel of the whole experience of the wider landscape and the appliance of science to agriculture, members of visitors to the household of the 4th Earl of Holderness undertook visits regularly to Arbour Hill to view the dairying activities that would take place there. It's recorded in Windsor Great Park that visitors of Queen Charlotte, the wife of George III, regularly were entertained to visits at the dairy in Windsor Great Park, and more famously, Marie Antoinette used to affect to work at the dairy at the Palace of Versailles. So part of a wider sort of elite involvement in the working landscape associated specifically with dairying. In order to give effect to such activity, a carriage road was constructed from Hornby Castle through the adjoining woods to reach Arbour Hill, which still survives in part. Here we have the remains of a bridge designed by John Carr, which is part of the carriage route, which exists midway between the castle itself and Arbour Hill. And here we have the carriage entrance to Arbour Hill, where guests visiting the site to experience the dairying activities would have arrived and had picnics and entertainments on the lawn before viewing milking and cheese and butter making, maybe even participating in it or taking place within the farm building complex itself. Another shared enthusiasm between Robert Conyers-Darcy, 4th Earl of Holderness, and the King was the new natural landscape design, and the Earl, over a number of years, successfully lobbied for the King to appoint Lancelot, known as Capability Brown, as King's Gardener at Kew in 1764. We see the portrait of Capability Brown. The Earl of Holderness also employed a much lesser known landscape architect, the Reverend William Mason, sometimes a collaborator of Capability Brown, specifically at Newnham Courtenay near Oxford, but Mason himself more famously worked at Prior Park in Bath, a site that the King was subsequently to visit later on in the 1780s. The reorganisation of the landscape around Hornby, according to the new principles, began even before the refurbishment of the main house as a fashionable country house in the later 1760s. Here we see the Hornby Garden House, constructed in 1760, to have a high degree of intervisibility between the main house and itself, with separate entrances for guests and also for servants, and separate routes from the rear of the house for the servants to take food and drink and the accoutrements to the site, and a formal route over rustic bridge and through the waterworks for formal visitors. Dorothy Richardson, who visited in 1780, her diary includes a note to say that she was entertained by the valet to the 5th Duke of Leeds, who inherited from Robert Conyers-Darcy. In some good estate, the upper chamber held enough space to entertain 12 guests. And she describes how anyone with the appropriate credentials would be entertained by the Duke, who would send out to the local ale house for appropriate food and drink, which would be brought to the site. The interior included plasterwork by Cortese, who undertook the plasterwork at Fairfax House in York, and the archaeological fieldwork project was able to recover the plaster calcining hearth that Cortese used, and the frontage incorporated stained glass by William Peckett of York, and again sections of the stained glass were recovered during the fieldwork project. The design of the house was undertaken by the Reverend William Mason with the assistance of Horace Walpole. Viewers will notice the elements of similarity, the crenellation in particular, to Walpole's work at Strawberry Hill in Twickenham. Here we have the rustic bridge over one of the lakes at Hornby. As is characteristic of Brown's work, the design was by Carr, but as it's characteristic of Brown's work, it doubles as a dam, there being a series of changes of level across the lakes. Brown is not well known, but he was a very competent hydrologist and engineer. He's clad in tufa, and the stone was taken from earlier medieval structures on the site in constructing the garden house I've just shown the picture of. In 1763, the Reverend William Mason writes to the Earl to ask for permission to remove stone from what is described as the old tower, a short distance away close to Hornby Church. Here we have the Grand Serpentine Lake, the design of which is intended to have the appearance of a great river or body of water separating the house from the pleasure garden and creating a series of views against which both would be seen by visitors, being the focus of entertainment. So I will show shortly the boathouse that was constructed at the very end of the works in the 1780s. We have a painting done by John Miller in 1840. The bodies of water continued through the wider landscape, with the stone pond where local farmers could pay for the right to water cattle. It gave the overall Brownian appearance of being a natural landscape which wild animals and also livestock would stop and and would take water and be viewed against the backdrop of the country house behind. Here we have the boathouse, which I mentioned before, later used for as a base for duck hunting in the early 19th century. It's where intrepid visitors could go and be entertained in the water to music, and also to go fishing. The 5th Duke of Leeds was a patron of Franz Joseph Haydn's visit to London in the 1790s, and there are documentary references to Robert Conyers-Darcy, the 4th Earl, having musical entertainments in the park during the 1770s, which is carried on by his son-in-law, the 5th Duke, and his grandson, the 6th Duke, in the earlier 19th century. We tend to view the royal progress and the interest of the king in visiting the country houses of his associates and friends as something associated with Elizabeth I and James I at the turn of the 16th and the 17th centuries. But the progressive improvement of the estate at Hornby during the 1760s, 1770s, and being completed in the 1780s by the 5th Duke of Leeds show that that imperative had not gone away even 200 years later. Thank you for listening.